We want to thank everybody for tuning in and joining another episode of You and the Law podcast show. One of the co-hosts of the show, Virgil Green, and the guy on the other end of the mic goes by the name of Chief Swaggy One. How you doing?
What's going on, V? How you doing, brother?
Man, I'm doing all right. Hey, we want to let our listeners know we were having a few little technical difficulties. That's why we didn't get started right at 6 p.m. So we apologize for that. So hopefully we got some technical issues worked out. So if we throughout the show, if that occurs, then we apologize for that. But we're going to do everything we can to make sure we get through this podcast without having those uh, technical issues. Because we got a good topic tonight. Another one.
Yeah, we do, man. It's a topic that continues to trend throughout the nation. That it continues to involve the African American community and law enforcement, based on the words of a of one, of just one single person. So I think this is a really good topic about Karens.
Yeah, and we're going to get into you know where did that come from? Where did the word Karens come from? Everybody has seen countless videos of white women calling the police on black men, black women, black children. And so, I think this is a topic to talk about because, as you stated, it's something that hasn't changed. We showed a video a couple podcast shows ago where a black pastor in in the South was the police arrested him because he was watering his neighbor's flowers. Uh, a white neighbor had called the police because she didn't recognize him, and it looked suspicious. So uh, he didn't want to identify himself to the police, and he was arrested. And so, Keith, I think there are so many things that occur after the fact when these individuals call the police on African Americans, and oftentimes, Keith, it gets very confrontational because all of a sudden the police show up and say, who are you? What are you doing? Why are you here? I need to see some ID. And if you haven't committed a crime, then people will say, I don't need to show you that information because I haven't committed a crime. And so then you hear people like the video that took place down in Alabama, I believe. She said, "Hey, this is my fault. I made a mistake." And so, but it's too late, so you can't correct something. And this is also part of this conversation, Keith. Is how do police officers need to handle these situations, especially knowing when you get there, it's not a crime.
Well, there's probably a lot of people that want to ask the question, why is law enforcement even responding to these type of incidents? And, you know, we have no choice as law enforcement. If someone calls 911, we have to respond, especially if someone is sounding very, nervous, upset, hysterical. And but what I have seen in from these incidents, Virgil, I have seen that police have trained their dispatchers and officers to respond a lot differently. Now you hear dispatchers asking more questions regarding, what exactly is the person doing? Are you okay? And giving officers, it doesn't appear to be a crime. It appears to be some type of disturbance. And then when officers get there, they have a little bit more information. But it still doesn't negate the fact of the prior incidents that have occurred involving what we know as Karens. Have to know the history of it, and I'll tell you the most horrific situation was Emmett Till. I mean, that is the landmark Karen case.
Yeah.
We've seen movies like Rosewood, where an entire town of African Americans were brutalized and lot murdered based on the fact that a white female lied and said that African American male raped her, when in fact she had sexual relations with a white male. And so, not to tell her husband, or to keep her husband from finding out, she accused an African American male.
Yeah. Well, just like with the Tulsa race ride,
Yeah.
that whole race ride started because of what a white lady said that a black young man said on the elevator, and from there, just like with what happened with Emmett Till, what happened in Rosewood, all three of those, plus so many other incidents, Keith, all started because of what a white woman said to the police. The police are individuals who were like a posse, went after these people.
Virgil, it's interesting because you think about Emmett Till, and then you fast forward to, I believe, last year. I believe that was in New York, where you had a teenage boy. He may not even been a teenager, but a young man who was with his father, and you had a white female that accused him of stealing her phone. And
Yeah,
no matter how the dad basically was saying that didn't happen, I mean, she physically assaulted this kid.
yeah,
Thank goodness law enforcement did file charges on her. And it ended up that she had just misplaced her phone. No apology whatsoever. So I think it is just the nature of what's going on and the seriousness of what could end up happening, the consequences of these type of incidents occurring. We've seen incidents where you've had um, black families having barbecues in a park, or barbecues near a swimming pool, or in their yard, or in their driveway or backyard, and they have law enforcement calling on them. We saw an incident the other day. I mean, this is just not your average families. I mean, we've seen African American delivery drivers. We've seen uh, you know African Americans who are on their jobs who are being accused of doing something. As a matter of fact, I was watching a video the other day where this gentleman was doing his job. He was making deliveries, and this lady was going to take the package that he was delivering. And then when he pulled it back, she fell and basically said, "Oh, you pushed me." Well, thank goodness there was video there.
yeah,
Let's think about Terrell Owens. If there had not been video there when Terrell Owens was accosted and accused, just think what would have happened. And just what she says, you're a big black man, I'm a small white female. And
yeah.
you think they're going to believe? Those are the things that cause concern in the African American community and throughout the nation.
Yeah. Well, Keith, just like for those who have probably seen this movie that came out in 2021, it's a movie called Karens, where you had two young African American couple who moved to the suburbs in Atlanta, and they moved next door to a divorced white female who it became very. She definitely showed very quick uh, how she did not want to have black neighbors. And in that movie, which was a really good movie, if somebody haven't seen it, I think it's on Netflix or some other streaming services. But her brother was a police officer, and so that was it kind of showed you when a white female has a family member who is in law enforcement, how those two don't mix. And if that police officer took it upon himself to say that he was going to do everything to protect his sister, um, and so those are things that actually happen in real life, where you have family members police officers who get involved with situations where they shouldn't get involved with. And that was a good example. Uh, the people that played in that movie did everything they could to get along with her. And you have to, and those things actually happen just like with Terrell Owens, Keith, you know?
Well, Virgil, I'll tell you, I've experienced my own even in when I was the police chief at Little Rock, internally, where you had white female.
Well, you got to mention what happened to you in Norman.
Yeah, you gotta. I mean, so you have those incidents, and it does seem as though when a white female does make an allegation, it does seem that there are white males that will come to their rescue, because there's this black man who has violated this white female's rights, and even without asking any questions, it's assumed that the white female who's involved is actually telling the truth, or her word supersedes what the African American male says. And so, even as a police chief, we experienced that, and it's like it's no big deal. It's like when you complain, or when you make a complaint, or you file a lawsuit, it's like, well, we didn't do anything wrong. I mean, so I think that when you have someone who has that mindset, that's very scary, because you get to thinking about how many African American men have been murdered, hung, murdered, beaten, and are in the prison based on the words of a Karen, and it's still going on. And when you say something like, he's a large black man. Let's back up. Let's go back to Tulsa PD, the gentleman that was killed by the
Terrence
white
Pritchard.
That was killed by the white female. She's saying that she's afraid of him. He's a big black man. Then her husband, who's a helicopter pilot or riding in a helicopter, so he's a bad guy. He's a big black guy. He's a bad guy. So it goes to the fact that we have been villainized just simply because of what we look like and our size and the things that we do. I mean, when it gets to the point that you're calling law enforcement, Virgil, based on the fact that someone has their feet in a swimming pool, or based on the fact that someone is barbecuing in a park under a pavilion that they had rented, or because you come up with some fictitious HOA laws, all of a sudden, something that the new homeowners are not familiar with. So you come up with a fictitious, HOA violation, and then you call law enforcement. So then law enforcement gets out there, and this is where it gets ugly, because as a taxpaying citizen, as a grown man, as an adult male, you call the police on me because I'm on my own property and I've got my car parked and you don't like the way it's parked. You're calling law enforcement because I live in an apartment complex and I've got my feet in the pool. You're calling law enforcement on me because you just don't believe I look like I belong there. And like I said, in a neighborhood that I lived in before moving to Little Rock, I was accosted by, I guess he would be a Ken, a white male, that asked me basically what I was doing in the neighborhood, because I didn't look like I belonged there. And the fact of the matter is, he had never seen me before. So when I flipped the script and said that I've never seen you before, what are you doing out here? Well, I'm building this house here. Well, I'm building a house around the corner. And then, well, I've never seen you. Well, I've never seen you either. And then when I say, oh, let me introduce myself. I'm the chief of police. The whole mood changes.
Whole conversation,
conversation changes. Why should I have to introduce who I am before I'm not harassed? It's crazy. I've even had, we talk about Karens, or well, I'm going to call my husband. He's such and such. Do you know who my husband is? So it goes down to there's this sense of um, entitlement
Entitlement. Yeah.
and privilege
Yeah.
that I can get away with anything because of who I am and what I look like.
Yeah. Well, Keith, and I think it's really, just to go back and touch on what you just shared, what happened with you in Norman, Oklahoma, when you were, was a police chief there, that you're walking in your neighborhood, minding your business. Here you've got somebody who wants to take it upon themselves to question why you're in a certain neighborhood. And if you, so can you imagine the same thing happening to somebody who is not known or does not have a position within city government, just an average, uh, you know, black man walking down the street who may have worked at a car dealership or may work at, even working at, just at a grocery store. But you live in a
It's a
neighborhood where,
black man period, bro.
yeah,
Yeah.
period, yeah. So even for a black woman, or even black kids, and so there's things that should have stopped decades ago has just gotten more worse because everybody has a cell phone. Everybody, takes their cell phone out. They record these things. And one good thing, at least these things are being recorded and people are seeing how people are acting. And you've had some situation, Keith, where uh, their employers have taken some action to remove them from their workplace because they are these employees do not align the with the values of those of that business.
So you think about let's look at the recent incident at the University of Kentucky, Virgil. You have a young white female that just belittled and cursed a black female. For no reason.
Oh yeah, the one that was drunk.
For no reason.
Yeah.
What makes you think you can do that? I mean, what makes you think that you have a right to do that in 2022 at any given time? So I do think it's that sense of privilege and entitlement. But when you do that and know there's so many social media platforms and cameras and things, people recording, I don't care what people say. I don't think you get that. That you don't.
Well, if you do, you need.
Yeah, you need some help. Yeah. But Virgil, we talked the other day. Kind of give a history of where the Karen meme came from.
Well, before there was Karen's, there was Becky's, and for centuries, white women have been given this, slang word that goes back to, in the late 1800s, in the 1900s, and so there was Becky's, and then there was, the Karens came out, and so then you got, white men are referred to as Kens, and Keith, I want to, there is one title that black men and black women have not been given that is similar to white males and white females, is that you don't see black men calling the police on white men, or you don't see black women calling the police on white females, or you don't see Latinos calling the police on Latinos or calling the police on blacks. So, when we talk about the race issue, it's to me, it's gotten worse than and I know I use a word that you don't like me using.
Yeah. I'm not going to even. I think everybody picked up on it. I'm not saying a word.
Even I had to when I said it, because I already know what you're going to say. But there again, it has become more dangerous because people are using physical force with each other, and then sometimes weapons have been involved, and so you know, again, we talk about what happened with Emmett Till. We talk about what happened with the Tulsa race riots. We talk about what happened with Rosewood. There are situations that have happened in the last, in 2021, 20, uh, that are very similar to some things that have happened before.
Well, and that's why law enforcement has had to dig deeper into the responses that they make to these situations, and you have to give more information on the front end. I mean, you can't automatically go out there looking uh, looking for an incident where you might have to uh, take excessive force or extreme measures. But that's why it's important. And to the listeners out there, as law enforcement, when someone dials 911, we're not talking about these calls coming in to non-emergency. We're talking about people calling 911 and sounding frantic on the radio. I mean, on the phone, and basically saying that, this is what's going on.
Yeah.
We don't have the luxury as law enforcement not to respond but there could be a disturbance. Just the matter of fact that these individuals are making these phone calls. And if it would, I could probably see it if there was a phone call and then that person would stand to the side. But what we're seeing is that there's confrontation. And there have been those times when there's confrontation while they're on the phone with 911. Well, as law enforcement, you have to respond. So when you get there, who looks like the bad person, because you've only got one side of the story. And so that's why it takes a really good officer with great emotional intelligence and communication skills to separate that situation and find out exactly what happened. And that's how you calm that situation down. You can't go in automatically thinking that the person that called 911 is less aggressive or not causing a problem. That automatically the person that she called in about is the one that's actually causing the problem.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you, as a grown man, it is very, very difficult for some adults, men and women, that when they haven't done anything and then they're approached in a police investigation, they're going to be defensive. You're going to be defensive. You're going to automatically want to defend yourself, and you're going to want to say it's going to get ugly based on something that somebody said that isn't true.
Well, and Keith, and I think that's I want to get to this comment that Pam Humphrey made. She said it's almost as if there is a Karen playbook floating around in this country. I mean, because you have so many women who say very similar things. They're on the phone with a dispatcher, and they're escalating the situation by saying, "Oh, he's big. He's going to attack me," and all of a sudden, that person that's a dispatcher, they don't know what's going on other than what they're being told over the phone. So they're going to probably prioritize that call to where more officers are going to respond based upon the information that person on the other end of the phone is providing. And so then when the officers get there, all of a sudden, it's hands on, and you've got a black man or you got a black woman standing there saying, "Hey, wait a second, listen, I didn't do anything wrong. Here, this lady here called you all on me, and I'm just trying to get into my apartment, or I'm just trying to get through the gate to get into my neighborhood, but I'm being held against my will."
And on top of that, Virgil, you're being told to shut up, sit down.
Yeah. Well, and see, and Keith, that's the bad part about it. That you and I know. I mean, we're in law enforcement. To me, when you tell a grown man or a grown woman to shut up and to sit down, that's where I go back, and I've said this many times before, and we'll continue to say it. The culture of policing has to change. And I will tell even a black officer, because we got some black officers who do the same thing. They're not immune from being called out because you got some black officers who will talk to black people just because they're black any kind of way. And that's not right. So, and I always tell people, you talk to people the way you want to be treated. And apparently, Keith, this is just my opinion. You tell me if I'm wrong, and those who are listening tell me if I'm wrong. If you talk to people that way, then that's how you should be talked to.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to tell people that it's very difficult to tell people to be calm when they're being talked to disrespectfully. It is very difficult to tell someone to be calm when you are, number one, you're being put in a situation where you haven't done anything. Now, I'm not talking about situations where someone's committed a crime and it's a violent crime, it's an in progress crime. What I'm talking about, the situations where you have someone call law enforcement based on someone's not doing anything wrong. All they're doing is trying to enjoy themselves. All they're doing is to have some friends. Now, we're not even talking about the loud music. And even if there is a disturbance with loud music, I don't have a problem with you calling law enforcement and say, hey, could you have somebody come out to play, loud music is being played. I don't have a problem with that. It's when you embellish it and add additional things to get a quicker response and to get a more extreme response. And then at the end of the day, your information, your story is already there. That officer's working this call based on your story alone. And then by the time they get over and talk to the individuals who they've been called to respond to, everything's heated. I don't like the fact when I see a situation where you talk to one person and you base your decision as an officer based on what this person said, where this person lives, what this person's driving, how this person looks. I have a problem with that. We're not talking, and let's just say this. I'm very comfortable in saying, Virgil, that probably about 80% of these calls do not involve criminal acts. I'm very comfortable in saying that. And it's probably higher. Yeah. They don't involve criminal acts. An accident is a civil act. It's not a criminal act unless somebody gets hurt or someone intentionally. But a minor fender bender, oh my God, they're threatening me. I'm afraid. How many times have you and I got on an elevator and, a person's on the elevator and they get off when you get on, or they move their purse to the other side?
Yeah.
So the tension's already high in this nation. And then you add someone calling based on a perception or the fact that they just don't want you there. That makes it even more explosive.
Yeah. Well, hey, Keith, I want to remind everybody tonight's podcast topic is how are police responding to calls involving Karens. And, we're talking about this because, again, you've seen so many, videos on YouTube and TikTok and, where all these other videos that you've seen posted. And police officers are responding. Sometimes you do see police officers handle the situation where the person who called the police, they end up getting arrested or end up getting cited for disorderly conduct or for some other, misdemeanor charge. But oftentimes you are seeing where they're escalating the situation more than they're de-escalating the situation. And Keith, I want to, and this is something that I saw yesterday. I was trying to get the video to share because this is something we always talk about, that it happens to Black men and Black women. I saw a video where a white female stopped a white male walking down the street because she thought that he had what appeared to be in his back pocket something that looked like a gun or a weapon. She asked for his ID. He wouldn't give it to her. She said, "Hey, you got something that looks like a weapon." He pulls it out It's actually a walking cane. Another officer gets there, supposedly he's the supervisor. He tells him, I haven't committed a crime. Unless you can tell me why I need to show my ID, I'm not going to show you my ID. It wasn't a weapon, it was a walking cane. But you had this white female and this white male officer handcuff and arrest this white male for, I don't know, for whatever reason. But this is much a broader issue where you just got men and women, and I think I sent you the video. They shouldn't be wearing a uniform, because if you cannot look at a person and say, "Hey, we just want to make sure that you're not in possession of a handgun. Go on about your day. Have a nice day." But we just don't know how to. We have some officers, not all. We have some who just don't know how to get their keys.
The good thing about some of this, man, is now you have these women and these men facing criminal charges on false reports, assault, and there have been some incidents where police have even failed to respond to calls to their residents based on their history, and so that's some comfort, but it still doesn't negate the fact that there have been individuals who have been jailed, hung, beat, kicked out of school, fired, humiliated, based on the fact that someone just thinks that they can say what they want to. Pam Humphrey says that there should be a section of caring scenarios, training for recruits, and it's called de-escalation, and it's called, they go through different scenarios regarding what's a crime, what's not a crime, how to respect both individuals, separate both individuals, and listen to both. That's why when you have 2-3 officers, you always send an officer with one party and another officer with another party, and then they come back and they compare notes instead of taking one person's side, then going to the other person and the officer being accusatory. So you're right, there could be more training, but I think there needs to be laws enacted to address this. I mean, there are laws on the books that can address these type of situations, but I think there needs to be special laws because it's becoming more dangerous than it has been. I mean, it's to the point that you have individuals, and I truly believe that the police respond more effectively to certain, depending on the areas that people live in, based on what their zip code is. So if the zip code is, has a high socioeconomic level, they are going to respond quicker. They are going to listen to that individual more in depth. Not all the time, but a lot of the times, listen to that individual more in depth than they would the individual that doesn't live in that area.
Well, Keith, and I know, there's been some states that have enacted, proposed Karen laws where it will, make it either some type of a misdemeanor or, depending on what type of crime, maybe even a felony. And I've always said this, you have politicians who create laws that's going to, anytime something happens, you got a politician that says, "Hey, we're going to create a law." You haven't heard a lot of conversation about, we need to make sure that this law protects minorities. Just like what's going on with the John Lewis Act that hasn't passed, just like with the other laws related to civil rights. Those things haven't passed because you have a group, and I think, Keith, this is something that people who look like you and I and people who don't look like you and I clearly see that you have politicians who are not for all people. As a politician, you're supposed to be representing everybody. You're not just supposed to be representing the people that look like you. So you got to ask yourself: are some of these laws not being passed because these laws don't affect people that look like them?
Well, I mean, why would you when it's your wives and your daughters and your sisters are the ones that are some of the biggest Karens, in in the country? And do you think Clarence Thomas's wife is a Karen?
Yeah, yeah.
I'm just curious. I mean, just some of the things that I've
I,
heard.
I mean, there again, Keith. I mean, you sometimes, and I think that's the problem, man. You don't want to be judgmental, but you just got to call some things out the way you see it, because here is somebody. What really gets me with that man, and I don't want to say too much about him, when he said that he doesn't fully understand what diversity really means. Now, that's real concerning as a black man who is a Supreme Court justice who says, I've heard the word, but I really don't know what diversity really means. So where have you been at? I mean, did affirmative action help you get into Yale or get into Harvard? But all of a sudden now when you become an older black man and you've got this status and you've got money, now you kind of forget where you come from. So, and we have a lot of Clarence Thomases who get to a certain point in their life because they've been around, they're older, they're making some money, and all of a sudden now they how George Jefferson said, "Hey, we're moving up to the east side." I don't think George ever forgot where he came from, but you got some George Jeffersons who truly forgot that how they were raised by their parents.
So, so we call him Stephen from Django. Uh, pure no Stephen from Django. That it's I want to be liked. I want to get along. Listen, when you're a grown man, you tell the truth, and you can't be afraid to tell the truth. And facts are facts. Um, you know, when you're relating facts and when you're relating things that have happened to you, then you shouldn't be afraid to relay that information. You have people who look like you and I who are so afraid to relay that information that they will take that stuff to their grave. They will do whatever they need to do to fit in. As a matter of fact, they will get upset with you based on the fact that you're making a scene. You're making it seem like all black people are mean and want to fight and disruptive. So hey, leave me out of that. Um, I'll give you an example, man. I had a young man that worked for me in the previous department that I was affiliated with, and big guy, and always talking about civil rights, and hey, I got your back, and man, I'm not going to tolerate that, and basically stood by while there was some plotting going on against me, and then came and told me about the plotting, and then when I said, well, would you be willing to, I got to work here, and um,
Change the tone, change.
I got to work here, and they may not tell me anything else, but this is a big dude that talks a lot of noise, but then he won't stand up, and it's the exact same thing when it comes to. And I will tell you that it takes a very very strong person that puts themselves on the back burner that will stand up for what's right, and so that's why I hope people get out of this show the fact of the matter that we're going to talk about what's right. We're going to bring current events up. People will probably say, well, why are y'all talking about this? This is facts. We're not making this up. You can
Yeah,
pull up hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of videos. We didn't make up the name Karen. That's been around for hundreds of years. It was Becky, then Karen. We didn't make that up. We didn't make up the fact. We didn't cause those individuals to do the things that they're doing. So we're going to deliver the message so everybody understands, people, and make people aware of what's actually going on out here. This is real. This is not fantasy. This is real. It's not fiction. It is actually real. The things that are going on to African American men by certain white women.
Yeah. Well, Keith, I just looked up something and found we're out in San Francisco. Uh, they are proposing a anti-Karen law in Berkeley, and this ordinance would outlaw racial biased 911 calls. So, you know, a lot of things happen on the West Coast because it's a little bit more progressive than things are happening in the Midwest and down south. So you do have local government city council members who are trying to take some action to put some laws on the books that where if these things do happen, people would be held accountable. And I'll say this, Keith, and I think if people start getting arrested, uh, they'll think twice, and then those around them, they'll think twice about calling the police on, hey, there's this black kid walking down the street, and he's carrying a gun, and this kid is walking down the street carrying, a golf, a golf stick, a golf club, not a stick, but a golf club. Or here's somebody walking down the street, because hey, maybe there's some dogs that they want to make sure don't attack them, and they've got something to defend themselves. So I think when these type of laws are put in place, and where law enforcement actually enforces these laws, because you know, we go back to the saying, you have a lot of discretion. So you got some officers who may, well, I don't want to arrest, you know, Bob over there because Bob is, 80 years old. Well, if the law says if Bob broke the law, Bob needs to be arrested. You would do the same thing you would treat that person of color like that law need to be applied.
Well, man, when you get to the point and you make comments like, well, they're going to be deported anyway, they were going to do something anyway. I mean, so why would, if that's the mindset, uh, of law enforcement, how can things change? Well, we'll get them now because they were going to do something in the future anyway. So we'll just go ahead on and stop, get them now on this little traffic stop or whatever. But, Virgil, it's scary. It is scary, scary, scary that these type of actions, you go back to 16, 17, 1800s when this was prevalent. I mean, this was happening more and more. And just to think, 300-400 years later, this thing is happening. Because I'm telling you right now, man, there's no doubt in my mind there have been African American men that have been beaten down in the last 2 or 3 years, or in this century, or the last 30, 40 years, based on what someone said, some female said. So I think there are people who still have that Emmett Till mindset. There's still those type of actions that are going on. And that is scary. And something has to be done about that.
Well, Keith, and I think that's why we're having this conversation tonight as we talk about how are police responding to calls involving Karens, because again it starts with the person who calls the police, makes the 911 call. The police gets respond. How are the police handling that situation once they realize this man or woman or child hasn't broken the law? Just like we saw a video of a lady at a hotel, at a swimming pool, where the family had a room, but they were in the pool, the police get there, and now they want to know, well, I need to see your the key to your room. I need to see your ID. Well, you're in a swimming pool. Who takes their ID to a swimming pool?
Well, that's not a criminal act, and so unless they're doing something that would require you to ask for that, really and truly, as law enforcement, based on the fact that you got somebody call, say somebody's in the pool, you got to have a little bit more than that before you start asking for people's ID and things like that. I mean, that's the problem right there. I mean, we don't enforce. That's a civil issue. That's not a criminal issue. That didn't come from hotel management. That came from another guest. And so, because that person believed that family did not look like they belonged there. That's where that came from. And that in itself is the problem.
Yeah. Well, and again, I think, earlier, Pam mentioned about, the training. Um, there's de-escalation training, but I think sometimes you have to put people who don't look like you. You can have scenario trainings with other police officers, but does it have the same impact when you are dealing with people who are not police officers? Because, go ahead.
Virgil, I think that's why it's important when you're doing these scenario training to have members of your Citizens Police Academy portray the citizens, or be the actors. That's why you should have a really strong relationship with your minority community, your community, period, and utilize some of your community leaders as actors in the different scenarios. You cannot get an effective, I don't think you can get effective training when you have law enforcement officers portraying citizens. I think you have to have citizens that they have to actually have contact or have to engage with actual citizens to get a more realistic point of view. I'm telling you right now, police officers are not great actors. It's not the best scenarios. So you have to start utilizing your civilians in those scenarios.
Yeah, I totally agree with you because again, you need to have some real, something that's realistic about it, not something that you kind of know what's going to happen because you know this other person what they may say or what they may not say. So I think when you do put officers in situations, now that those critical thinking skills need to be applied as to, what I should or shouldn't do. And then oftentimes keep the biggest thing, communication. Listen to what the other person is saying. You said something earlier in the podcast where your police officers are telling people, shut up, sit down, don't move. And if you don't do what I tell you to do, I'm going to arrest you. We've talked about this many times on previous podcast shows. As a grown man, how are you going to tell a grown man to sit down and shut up, or even a grown black woman? And you have some women who are very vocal who will sit there and say some things to you that you probably don't want to hear. But but this just goes back to treat people like they're human. And again, I've always told officers, if you talk to people that way, then that's the way you want people to treat you.
Now, have you asked me if I've ever told anybody shut up? Absolutely. But it was in a very volatile situation, and that's what was needed at that time. But is that something?
Oh, yeah. Every situation is different.
Every situation different. But in these situations, when you are going directly to that person who called and you're waiting later to go and talk to the individual that's being called on, that doesn't sit well. You give those individuals equal opportunity to explain what's going on. And then I said earlier, then you come back together as the officers come back together and talk about it. You're going to find there's the facts in there somewhere. But 9 times out of 10, when somebody's going to tell you, this Karen's going to say, well, they don't belong here. I've never seen him here before. I've never seen her here before. They just look suspicious. Man, come on.
Yeah.
That in itself right there. You got to learn we got to start asking the right questions. Okay, what makes them suspicious? Well, they got their feet in the pool. Man, I'm out of here.
Sometimes
I'm out of here. I'm not dealing with that.
Yeah, and I think there are situations where police officers do handle those type of calls, and those calls turn around against the person who called in. Now that person has got a beef with the police because they're not doing what they thought the police were initially going to do. I'm gonna go back to the video that took place in Alabama with the pastor watering the flowers. All it took, it was very simple for those police officers to tell that pastor, listen, sir, we were just responding here because somebody called in. They didn't know who you were. Now we know who you are. You go ahead. You have a nice day. Go ahead and finish watering your neighbor's flowers. But one of the officers had to say, well, pastor isn't a name. To me, I think that's very offensive because, as a black man to tell a black pastor, well, every pastor will start off by saying, I'm Pastor, Smith.
I'm Reverend.
I'm Reverend Smith. Yeah. So just like how it is with the police chief, my name is Chief Humphrey, or my name is Chief Green. So when a person puts a title in front of their name, you need to respect that, especially a preacher. I mean, if this man say, hey, my name is Pastor Jenkins, I pastor this church over here. And if you sit there and say, well, pastor, that's not a name. Well, that lets you know that you are only serving part of the community that you're policing. Well, so that means you're.
Virgil, I don't. Why should you have to tell a person who you are as far as your title?
You shouldn't.
You shouldn't. You shouldn't have to tell someone that. We're trained to. We take an oath to respect people, and so we've gotten away from that based on the fact that we're so focused on what law enforcement is so focused on what people look like, where they live, focused on what one other person say. We're so focused that if we don't do something, we're going to get complained on. This lady called, we don't do something, we're going to get complained on. So I refuse to get complained on. So I'm going to take enforcement action. We've gotten away from just common sense and common courtesy as law enforcement. We feel as though we have to do something when we get there. We haven't done our job if we don't write a ticket. We haven't done our job if we don't arrest someone. We haven't done our job if we don't chastise someone. We've got to leave and show that we are, we're Superman, we're invincible, and we're always right. And that's what gets us in trouble. And it's the same thing with these situations. We don't want to, hey, the good woman called. She wouldn't lie. She lives in this part of the city. This is such and such's wife. This is, Congressman such and such's wife. She wouldn't lie. So, hey, you got to get out of here. Now, we're enforcing laws that we don't have a right to enforce because they're not civil. I mean, they're not criminal. They're civil. And a lot of them are not. There's nothing. There's just the fact of the matter. A person doesn't want someone there, or they don't like the way a person looks. So we don't have the right. We don't have the right to enforce that. We don't have the right to move people because somebody doesn't want them there just because of the way they look.
Yeah,
we don't have that right in law enforcement, but we're making it our right to do it.
Yeah, well, getting to one of the comments in the chat room, Tony Hollis said he agrees that severe penalties need to be assessed against these Karens and Kevins, which will deter these folks of this inappropriate behavior or other cases of racial behavior. So, again, I think, there's a lot of communities that are not very well diverse. And you have a lot of Latinos, you have a lot of Black people, You even have Asian people who move into communities where this is where they want to live, this is where they want to raise their families, but they become victims of just because of where they want to live at. And then you have the police where that city may be, have a high pop, demographics of whites, and a police force who doesn't look like those people that they're going to serve and protect. So again, there's just so many things that need to change, Keith, uh, related to how police are responding to calls involving Karens. And one of the things is, and this is for those who are involved in your local politics, this is something that you should be talking with your council members about. And this is something that your council members need to be talking with your state representatives about making sure that there are laws that are protecting people, but it starts at the local level. If there is city ordinance, just like what they're trying to do out in Berkeley, California, then those are things that other municipalities need to be trying to implement.
Virgil, I'll tell you, there is a bright side to this. You do have a lot of white males and white females that are calling Karens and Kevins out.
Yeah. Oh yeah, they are.
You do. You have a lot.
Yeah.
I got one more Karen story before we go off.
Okay.
I got one more Karen story. So I had just gotten to Little Rock. I'd been there probably about 6 or 7 months, and I met with one of the city council people and my assistant chief and one of the majors over the Southwest District. And we were talking about the new geographical configuration that I was putting into place. Keep in mind, this council person was in school when the Little Rock Nine was there. She was one of the ones that marched, and I would be safe to say she was probably one of the ones that was spitting and hitting on those kids. I'm not no doubt in my mind. She basically, we were explaining it, and she basically stopped us in the middle of the conversation and asked me, what was I doing there? Nobody told me to come there. Who gave me the right to change the way the police department were doing things or anything about the department? And so I immediately told her that she was very rude. And I told her that nobody was paying her to make the city safer. My job was to look at the configuration of the city and make it what I felt was the best for the citizens.
Yeah.
Period, point blank. She then went and told someone that I turned the table over, kicked the chairs.
We became the angry black man.
Became the angry black man. And I'm like, well, where did that happen? But
yeah, where was I at?
Yeah, that's the kind of stuff that, and I think she still has that in her. She's angry over the fact that, the Little Rock Nine prevailed. And so she's never forgiven African Americans for that. And it was our opportunity to try to, make me look bad. But the good thing about it, one of the individuals there was like, man, that never happened. That never happened. But, it's just somebody asks you, who do you think you are? Somebody, who do you think you are coming in here? Who gave you permission to do that? Really? So that's just crazy. But anyway, I just hit that Karen story. So Karen's come in all ages.
Yeah. Well, hey, brother, it's been another great podcast show, and we definitely coming up on the last few seconds of the podcast. So we want to thank everybody for taking the time to tune in and join us for another episode of You and the Law podcast show. And definitely tune in next Thursday for another episode of You and the Law podcast show.
Peace.